Hello everyone and welcome to a new video in this operating system tutorial series. And in this video, I'm going to discuss about file system management, like which is also one of the important part in an operating system. So before this, I have already covered a lot of other stuff in operating system. So of course, the one of the important one is process management. And in management, I have covered process creation, process scheduling, process versus threads, and process synchronization. And after process management, I have covered memory management. And memory management, I have covered virtual memory, pages, MMU, page tables, how to convert logical to physical address, what are the different page replacement algorithms. So I have covered all of this, and you will find the link to the playlist where all of these videos are stored. So you can see the description here and you should find it. Okay. And in this video, I'm going to cover about file system management. So there are different topics in file system management, and I will not be covering all of this in this video. I will be covering just the files and directories and implementation of file system or virtual file system, basically VFS. I will be covering these two in this video, and others like disk scheduling algorithms, RAID and Linux file system commands. So some of the Linux file system commands I will cover in this video itself, and some in the next part, basically file system management part 2. Basically whatever is left, I will cover that in next video. Let's start with what is a file system. So this is one of the definition of file system. A file system is the methods and data structures that an operating system uses to keep track of files on a disk. That is the way the files are organized on the disk. So the definition of file system is very important. So you should understand what actually is file system. So file system is a very important concept in operating system. So do not think that the disk itself is the file system. That's wrong. So you have the files. So you have the disk basically, right? Where you store some data. So let's say this is the disk. Now, I mean, there has to be something, right, which manages the disk. So which helps in writing the data, reading the data, searching the data, right? Because see, we as the users, for example, I mean, we are mostly telling the operating system or the kernel, right? So typically user will be there, and then there will be kernel here. Okay. And at last, let's say there will be your devices, all your hardware devices will be there. And of course, one of them will be disk also, right? Keyboard will be there, disk will be there, RAM is there. We have already discussed about RAM already, right? In memory management. And here we are discussing about, I mean, disk and other hardware devices basically in file system. So here you have, like in this device, you have the disk also here, right? So user will typically say, okay, I want to read this file. I want to write this file. And of course, all of these has to go through kernel, because kernel is the one that manages all these hardware devices. So whenever you tell the kernel to read or write the file, okay. Now the kernel, I mean, kernel has to talk to this disk, right? So how can the kernel talk to this disk? So it uses the file system basically to talk to this disk, right? And this file system has a lot of data structures and methods that are used by the kernel when it is talking to this hardware devices. And the hardware device, of course, there is the disk here. Now, some of the famous examples of file systems, like in Windows, you have FAT and NTFS. These are some of the famous file systems in Windows. In Linux, you have ext family file systems like ext, ext2, ext3. Now you have ext4 also, right? Like basically, these are different versions of ext. Now in Mac, you have AFS or Apple file system. So these are some of the file system that I'm discussing here. And there are a lot of file systems. And do remember one thing, like whatever I am discussing in this video, I am discussing all of this in terms of mostly in terms of Linux operating system, right? So whatever concepts I'm discussing here. So I'm discussing file system with respect to Linux operating system mostly here, not with respect to Windows or Mac mostly. But yeah, some of the concepts may be applicable to all the operating system, right? The next question is why need for a file system? So what is the need for a file system? Why does operating system needs a file system? Okay, so main memory RAM, of course RAM we have discussed, is volatile. That is, data is lost once you power off your system. So main memory or RAM is like used for storing temporary data. You cannot store permanent data in RAM. So for permanent data, you have to use some other form of storage. So let's say if you have to store some important text files, audio files, video files, images. No, these are not temporary files. You need this all the time on your system. So you cannot store these on RAM. because of course on RAM, if you power off your system, it gets lost. So you need a persistent storage system, and that's where basically HDD or hard disk drive or SSD, solid state storage drives. So this type of devices helps in permanently storing this data. Now, of course, you have these devices, HDD, SSD, but still the operating system needs something to manage these devices, right? So that's where file system comes in. The file system is needed for managing these devices. And all of these examples, right? NTFS, FAT, ext family file systems, right? AFS, right? All these are file systems which are used to manage these hardware devices. Let me also discuss about block devices. So till now, I have discussed mostly about hard disk. Okay. So hard disk, of course, hard disk is one of the most popular, I will say, I mean, storage device, right? Where you can store data permanently. Hard disk is one of the popular one. And of course, hard disk is also one of the popular block devices. I will discuss what block devices is, but there are other block devices also, which can be used to store data permanently. A block device is a computer data storage device. Of course, it's used for storage purpose and for storing data permanently, that supports reading and writing data in fixed size blocks, okay, or sectors or cluster. This is very important, in fixed size blocks, okay. So if you have to read or write to this block device, you have to, I mean, not you, of course, operating system has to do in terms of fixed block size, okay. Of course, we have other types of devices also, like word address devices, RAM. We have already discussed RAM. And in RAM, if you need to access data, you need to access data in terms of words. So a word is typically, mostly it can be like 1 byte to around 8 bytes. So it can range from something 1 byte to 8 bytes. Okay. And RAM and ROM are examples of word address device. So you also have character devices that are ports and keyboards. So here the accessing is done character by character, not word by word or not block by block. It is done here by character. That's what happens in your keyboard, right? When you type character on your keyboard, that character is read, right? The operating system reads your data character by character. So in block device, the reading or writing is done in form of fixed size blocks. And this size of, I mean, this fixed size block is typically very big. That is around 512 bytes. And it can, of course, go greater than this also. It can start from 512 bytes and it can go maybe 1024 bytes, for example, right? Or more than that also. Some of course, famous examples of block devices are hard disk, a CD-ROM. You would have used, I mean, CD-ROM a lot during the old times. Nowadays, it's not used a lot. Similarly, floppy disks also are not used a lot nowadays. Also, the hard disk data is accessed randomly. Now, this is very, very important. Like in character devices, what happens? The data is not accessed randomly. So in character device, the data is ordered by sequence, right? So when you're on your keyboard, right? When you type WOLF, right? So your operating system will read first W, then O, then L, then F, right? In sequence, it will read. In word address device, RAM and ROM, again, of course, yeah, the operating system can randomly go to any position in RAM. That's true. But in hard disk case, it is a bit different because hard disk, as I told, the size of, right, the size that I mean, that you can access, right, is very big, 512 bytes. So basically, let's say this is a hard disk. Okay. Now the data access can be something like, okay, first operating system needs data from somewhere here. The next time we needs from somewhere here, again from here, again from here, right? It's randomly from any position on the disk. That's why it's, I mean, the data is accessed randomly. The same thing happens on RAM also, right? Same things happen on RAM. Sometimes kernel will be accessing data from here, sometimes from here, sometimes from here, okay, from anywhere. But of course, RAM is very, very fast. And here I mean, you have word address device. RAM is a word address device. This is like you have blocks, right? You have blocks here that also a big size, right? 512 bytes. So that's the main difference. I will discuss some more difference below. Now, properties of a block device. So the smallest addressable unit on a block device is sector. Okay, this is very, very important. This is, I mean, on a block device, the smallest unit like that you can, I mean, access basically is called sector. Sectors come in various powers of 2, but 512 bytes is the most common size. That's what I told, right? For hard disk, I mean, like if you want to access, right, hard disk, you have to access, of course, in terms of blocks. And the most common size here is 512 bytes. Okay, there may be one confusion here, like why I'm calling this blocks, okay? I mean, what actually happens is in most of the books or in most of the context, people will say, people will use the words blocks and sectors interchangeably. They will not differentiate between these two, but of course there are difference, okay, that I will discuss a bit after some time. Okay. So read and write to a block device is very slower compared to RAM. This is very important point. So when you are reading and writing to a block device like hard disk, CD-ROM, floppy disk, it's very slow operation. And in RAM, it's very fast. If you are reading and writing to a RAM, it's very fast. Now, what makes this block devices very slow? One of the reason is that, let's say, for example, okay, this is your again hard disk, okay. Now, let's say if you want to write at this position, let's say, if you want to read or write at this position. So first the disk, the way the disk works, it has to first locate this location, and locating this location itself takes a lot of time for the disk. That's not in case of RAM. In RAM, it's very easy to locate any memory, but that's not in a block device like disk. Okay, it takes a lot of time to just seek to one specific position, and of course for reading or writing also it takes a lot of time. Okay, and of course there is a video here, I pasted the link here, you can watch this and understand how actually a hard disk works. You will see the concept of sectors, rotations, and how how a particular position is found and how it is written, and read, right? You will see that in this video. I'm not covered in, I'm not covering all those details in this video. Now let's move to block. Okay, as I was telling you, right, in most contexts, people do use blocks and sectors interchangeably, but there is a difference. Here I told, right, sector is the smallest addressable unit in a block device. So in a hard disk, the smallest addressable unit will be called as a sector. Now, what is block? The smallest logically addressable unit of a block device. But see this line, this is important. Of course, block is also the smallest addressable unit of a block device, but for a file system. Okay. Now, for the disk itself, see this. Here, see this diagram here. For this hard disk itself, the smallest unit is called sector. Okay. So whatever this hard disk will do, whatever operations it will do internally, it will always do in terms of sector. Okay, whatever operations it does. So your file system will never see these sectors. They will, this file, whatever file system you are using on your operating system, they will never see these sectors, and they do not understand what sectors are. What they understand is what blocks are. Okay, they basically have so basically, block and sectors are, quite same actually, but of course they are for different purpose. Sector is used within the hard disk internally for its operation, and blocks are used for file system. And of course, there will be mapping between each sector to this block basically. So you can again remember the concept of memory management. If you remember in memory management, the process has its own like logical pages were there for a process, right? The process memory was divided into logical pages, and then you had main memory, which was divided into multiple frames, right? And this logical pages was mapped to some frame. Similar thing is happening here also. So you have the sectors here in the hard disk, that is a part of the hard disk, again similar to the RAM. You have sectors here, and for the for the file system itself, it sees these sectors as blocks. Okay, it will see that, okay, for example, this sector is kind of this block here, so different names, right? So whatever operations the file system will do, it will always do in terms of blocks. And of course the operating system will tell, okay, that, okay, write to, okay, take example of this, for example, okay, you have a file, let's say, okay, that is of, let's say, maybe thousand bytes. Okay, this is of 1000 bytes, and let's say each of this sector is of 512 bytes. Okay, each of these sectors, and of course the block size also is, let's say, 512 bytes here. Okay, now of course for storing this file of 1000 bytes, you need at least two sectors or two blocks, right? So of course the file system, what it will do, it will tell that, okay, write to this, let's say this block number is 1, this is 2. The file system will order the hard disk to write to these two blocks, okay, 1 and 2. And then the hard disk will see that, okay, these two blocks are basically mapped to these two sectors. So the hard disk will write to these two sectors. Now for a block device, the smallest addressable unit is sector. Okay, do remember this. This is a very important point. For a block device like hard disk, the smallest addressable unit is sector. But for a file system, right? For a file system, the smallest addressable unit for any block device is a block. And there is of course a mapping between sectors and blocks. Now the block size is always greater than equal to sector size and is a multiple of sector size. So if I mean the common sector size is 512 bytes, so this block size will always be either equal to 512 bytes or maybe multiples of this. Maybe it can be around 1024 bytes or maybe 2048 bytes, right? In multiples of this. Okay, so that was all about just understanding the basic concepts of what a file system is, examples of file systems, what is the difference between sectors and blocks, right? Now we will discuss more about files and directories that actually you use in your day-to-day work, right? Whenever you are on your laptop or on your desktop, you do create files, you delete files, you read from files, you write to files, right? So we will discuss about those operations here. Now, what are files and directories? So these are interfaces provided to the user to interact with the file system, right? So how do you interact with the file system? You interact with the help of files and directories. A file is a linear array of bytes on which you can perform certain operations like read or write. So of course, whatever your file is, right? So it's a linear array of bytes. So linear array of some data is there, right? You are storing some data on the files. So what directory? A directory contains a list of files and directories, right? So of course you can have files, you can have directories. In the directories, you can have more files, more directories, and this can go on, right? It's like a recursion, right? So I mean, let's say example, right? You have, I mean, one directory here. In this, you can have multiple files. You can have a lot of files. Now, one of this can be again directory. In this directory, you can have again, I mean, more files, and again one of this kind of directory, right? This can go on. Similarly, maybe let's say this is also directory. There can be multiple files here. So it's like a recursive tree here that goes on. By placing directories within other directories, users are able to build an arbitrary directory tree under which all the file directories are stored. That's what I was showing you, right? Like users are able to build a kind of tree with the concept of these files and directories. Now let's discuss about, as I told you initially, I will be discussing mostly about Linux operating system, like file system in Linux operating system. So let's see the directory structure, directory tree structure in Linux. So you have, of course, the root directory. That is, this is the root directory. And inside the root directory, you have multiple different directories. Important ones are being dev, etc, home, live, mnt, proc, root, sbin, tmp, user, right? And in bin again, you can have like different, for example, maybe files itself, let's say, right? Like pwd, ls, ksh, cp, these are different files in bin. Similarly, in home, like you can have two different users, m thomas and s2u1. And m thomas directory, you can have again, let's say another bin directory, another class stuff directory, dot profile, let's say file. And again, in class stuff, you can have foo file, bar file, right? So it's basically it's a directory tree basically, right? That's what you see in Linux. And if you have used Linux, any of the Linux operating system, right, you would have seen this type of folders in those and files in those. And of course, I have pasted a link here. Like if you want to understand what is actually stored in this bin, this dev, this etc, you can read this link, right? This will provide you a good idea of that. What are different types of files in Linux operating system? Now, this line is very, very important. And this you will hear or read a lot of times. Everything in Linux is a file. And that's right. Everything basically, I mean, even whatever your hardware devices are, right? Even I mean the Linux, right? Your Linux operating system sees those also as kind of files itself. Even your RAM, it sees the RAM also as a kind of file. All your hardware device, right? Whatever you have, it sees them as file. Your keyboard itself, right? It sees the keyboard as a kind of file. So all the operations are done with the help of files itself in Linux. That's why it's called everything in Linux is a file. So of course, different types of files are there. Directories is also a special type of file itself that we will see later on. So directories is also a type of file itself in Linux. Now you have special files that are used for input output. As I told you, right? Everything like RAM, hard disk, keyboard, all of these are kind of files itself. I mean, all the operations to this, right? So whatever operations are done to RAM, hard disk, keyboard, those all are done through some files. So these are special files basically, because these are used for special purpose of input and output. Then you have links basically. So I mean, there can be links also in Linux basically. So like you have file one, okay, file one, and there may be something like file two, okay, and this file two may be pointing to this file one itself. So if you open this file, right, since this is pointing to file one itself, I mean, when you open file two, the file one, I mean, you will see the content of file one itself because this is pointing to file one. That is the concept of links, pointers to files and directories. Then you have another important types of files called sockets. So even the network connection, right, that happens like, I mean, of course, TCP/IP connections, those network connections that happens, those also helps, I mean, happens with the help of these files called socket files, right? So basically the communication that is happening, right, in TCP/IP, that helps with, that happens with the help of socket files. The sockets are used for a special purpose of communication in TCP/IP, okay? So let's say if you in MTCP IP, you have one client here, right? One server here. And of course, there will be client process, server process, and they will be communicating, right? Basically using TCP IP protocol. And of course, on the client side, you will have some socket files, client socket files. On server, you have server socket files, and those will be helping in the communication. So named pipes are a bit different. Sockets are only used for TCP IP connections and communication. Named pipe can be used for, I mean, different, I mean, multiple other purpose. So if you want two process are there, right? These are not client and server. These may be two processes on your system itself. And if you want to communicate between these two processes, then you can use a named pipe. And this is general way to communicate between multiple processes. But sockets are not the general way. These are mostly used in TCP IP connection communication. What are the common operations on files? So of course you would have done this all, like creating files, opening files, reading files, writing to files, deleting files, renaming files, getting information about files, creating and deleting directories, changing file permissions. So these are some of the common operations that I have listed here on files. And you would have done a lot of this already. Now let's discuss about common file operations in C. So I am just showing you a program here, which is written in C programming language. And basically, how do you open a file in C? How do you write to a file? Okay. How do you close a file? So all of these operations are done here. So what this program is doing is, so it has two files, names and I mean, it is opening one file that is names.txt. It is opening another file read.txt, right? If you see here, let me change the color here. Yeah. So you can see there are two files, names.txt and greet.txt, and both are being opened in this. And one is used for reading purpose, R is here. One is used for writing purpose. Okay. So basically what this program is doing is it is reading all the contents from names.txt. So whatever content is there in names.txt, it will read those and then write those contents to this file, greet.txt. That so it is opening both of these files. So f open function you have in C for opening the files. So it is using that. And now it is checking that everything is okay. I mean, it is just checking that the files were opened correctly. If it is not, of course, it will give some error like file opening failed. Okay. Now let's say that both the files are opened successfully. What happens after that? What basically the program does is it has just created this character name 20, right? It for storing some data. Okay. Now you see this fscanf is there, right? Fscanf here. So fscanf is used for reading data from the file. So it is reading from these names, right? This names, this test. So basically now I'll be referring to this file with this names pointer. That's what I've used for opening that. So it is reading from these names here. So it is reading all the data from names here. And if you see, it is storing in this name variable here, whatever data is there. Of course, it will be line by line. Okay. And then it will write to this file. Fprintf is used for writing. So it will write whatever data is there. It will write greet. And greet is, of course, if you see, it is used for this greet.txt file, the reference greet, right? So it will write to this greet.txt file, hello, and whatever is, modulus s is there, basically it will replace what is here in this name. So of course, let's say if this names.txt contains Shivam, okay, and then let's say Ravi, okay, that these two names is there in this names.txt. So in the first fscanf, it will read, because it is in line by line, it will read Shivam and it will store this in name variable, okay. Then in the next line, it will go to another file greet.txt, okay. Let's say this is the file greet.txt. It will write to this file, that it will write hello first, okay, then followed by whatever it has read from this first file. So hello first, it will be Shivam here, okay. So again, the second time it will be Ravi and write hello Ravi. And now since there are no contents here, because if you're always checking greater than 0, right, whatever it is reading is greater than 0. But of course after this there are no contents, so this will not be satisfied and control will break from here. And finally, we are done with what we wanted to do. So we will close both of these files. with fclose function. So we have closed both of these files. So here are some of the basic operations. I mean, what you can do in C language, programming language. Now let's understand the concept of file descriptors. The reason why I am going to explain file descriptor is that, so when you are opening these files here, right, these files, names and greet. So what actually happens is that a new file descriptor is getting created, and that's what is getting returned here, right? This names pointer will be pointing to that. So one file descriptor will be created here for this fopen command, and this names will point to this one. Okay. Similarly, another file descriptor will be opened for this fopen command, and this greet will then point to this one. Okay. So that's why understanding file descriptor is very important. And even if when you are closing this, right, file descriptors, you see these names and greet are basically file descriptor. And when you are closing them, I mean, this basically kernel has allocated some memory for these file descriptors, right? So they will get destroyed. Basically, these file descriptors will get destroyed when you close this. And if you do not close this, you know what, and there are issues, right? Basically, you are not, you do not want to use this, but these file descriptors are still open. That is wrong, basically. So what is file descriptor? So this I have copied from a Stack Overflow answer. In simple words, when you open a file, the operating system creates an entry to represent that file and store the information about the opened file. That's what I told here, right? Whenever you open a file, some data structure is created for storing information about that file, right? That's data structure is basically your file descriptor. So if there are 100 files opened in your operating system, there will be 100 entries in OS somewhere in the kernel. These entries are represented by integers. So basically each of these file descriptor will have a unique ID. So let's say this is 1, this is 2, just an example here. Integers like 101, I mean 10101002, like this entry number is the file descriptor here. So it is just an integer number that uniquely represents an opened file in operating system. If your process opens 10 files, then your process table will have 10 entries for this file descriptors. So do remember, file descriptors are very important. Whenever you open a file, a new file descriptor is getting created to store a lot of data about those files. And of course, there will be a unique number associated with this file descriptor. Similarly, when you open a network socket, it is also represented by integer, and it is called socket descriptor, right? That I have covered in networking, computer networking, about sockets. So whenever you create sockets, a socket descriptor is associated with that. But here you have file descriptor. Now, okay, let's understand this again. So now another reason for taking this example of this C program was that you understand that, okay, what this fopen is, what this fclose is, right? But you also understand that, okay, what is the exact system call they are calling on the background. So when you're using fopen in that program, it is actually calling the open system call. So open system call is used, of course, this is implemented in the kernel itself, and this is used for opening a file. And fopen is basically kind of a library function that are using, right? This is a kind of library function that are using in your C code. And this open is the system code that actually helps in opening the file. Similarly, for fscanf, you are using, I mean, the read system call. For fprintf, you are using write system call. For fclose, you are actually using close system call. Okay. Do remember the difference between library function and system call. Okay. Now in Linux, as I told, right, in this video, I will discuss most about Linux operating system. So I will discuss also some of the important commands that are associated with Linux file system. Like I have written the commands here, but what I will do is I will show this demo, right, on the shell itself, so that you can understand these commands, what they actually do. Okay. And of course, I have some reference here at the bottom also that you can use. Like if you want to learn these commands in details, you can use that. Okay. So let me go to a shell and try to run this command. So now I am in a Linux shell here. So what I can do, first I can run ls command. Okay. So you can see, right, at present we are in the root directory. So you can also verify that using pwd. So it will tell you what is the present working directory. So you see the answer is root. So basically you are currently in the root directory. And in the root directory, these are the list of directories and files that are present here. And that you would have seen in the diagram I have shown, that the Linux directory tree, right? The same thing, same types of folders were there, and directories were like bin, dev, home, all of this, right? And then I can go to some other directory, like I can do cd, okay, and then I can go to maybe, let's say, home directory, right? And I can list it here. Of course, in my home directory there is nothing, there are nothing here, right? So what I will do is I will do some operations here in my home directory, okay. I will do all those file operations. So first I will do what I will do is I will write to some file. So I can use echo command. Let's say I want to write hello world to some file, let's say test underscore file, okay. So here what I'm doing is I want to write this hello world, right? And I want to write this to a file name called test underscore file. I am using echo command. If I press enter, so now this is done. So if you do ls here, ls is used for listing all the files and directories here. So you can see a new file has been created, test underscore file. And if you want to read the content of this file, you can use cat command. And if you use this, you should be able to read the content, that is hello world. That's what I have written here, right? Echo hello world to this file, and now I can read this. Now let's say another operation. Let's say I want to rename this file, okay? Test underscore file to test underscore file underscore one. Then I can use move command, mv, okay? Test file underscore one. So I'm basically trying to change the name of this file from this to this. If I press enter, now if I do ls, now you see initially the file was test underscore file. Now it has been renamed to test underscore file underscore one. Now again, you can cat this file and you will see the same content as hello world, okay. Now let's say you want to make a copy of this file, okay. I want to make one more copy of this file. So what I will do, I can use cp command for that. And okay, test. And let's say I want to, so of course I will not name the second file as same. So the copy I am making, okay, for this file, test underscore file underscore one, the copy name will be test underscore file, okay. Now let's run this command. Now do ls. Now you should have two files, because now we have made a copy of test underscore file underscore one, that is test underscore file. So we have two copies there of the same file. Now if you do cat on test file also, you should see the same content of hello world here, okay. So basically using cp command, we have copied data from one file to another. Now let's say if I want to delete this file now, test underscore file underscore one, I need to delete it. I can use rm command for this. If I use rm command, press enter. Now if I do ls, now you see this file has been deleted. Now you have only one file remaining, that is test underscore file. Let me clear the screen. Okay, this were mostly for like file operations. Now let's say if you want to create one directory, let's say, right, you want to create one folder. So you can use mkdir command, and let's say test dir. I want to create this directory called test underscore dir. So if I press enter and do ls here, so you see there is of course test underscore file here, and of course I have a new directory here, okay. And do remember, you cannot create a directory with the same name, right? Let's say test underscore file already exists in this, right? So if you try to create this, I mean a directory with the same name, let's see what happens. See, it gives an error that cannot create directory test file exists. The reason is that Linux sees both directory and files as same. I mean, like both are files for Linux, right? And you are trying to create two files with the same name, and that's not allowed. It basically, that's what is the error here. Now let's say you want to delete this. Of course, we have created this directory, and you can again go to this directory using cd command. You can go to test underscore directory inside this. Of course, there is nothing here, right? I will go back again to, I'm from wherever I came from /home. Now what I will do is I will delete this directory, okay, using rm command, rm and test directory. Okay. Now it is that cannot remove test directory is a directory. So of course I have to provide a flag here, rm minus r. Okay, this is very important. See, when I was deleting a file directly, you can use rm and then the file name, it will delete it. But in case of a directory, you cannot use it. So since a directory can consist of a lot of files and more directories, right? So you have to use this flag minus r to delete the directory. Now if you do ls, You should not see the directory here. It has been deleted. Now, if you want to change the permissions, right? So you have ls, you do ls minus l on test file, okay? So these are the permissions that are there. So basically, if you go into the details of this, I'm not going into very details of this. So these are the permissions that read, write, and this is for execution. So these are the permissions for the owner of this file, that is root. Now these three are the permissions for the group, group owner of this file, that is again root here. And these three permissions are for all other users basically, right? So here the permissions are for the owner of this file, that is root. This root is the owner of this file. The permissions for this root are, it can read to it, it can write to it, but it cannot execute it, because the third one is for execution and that is not set. So the root cannot execute it. Now for others, if you see, the others can only read this file, they cannot write to it. Okay. Now chmod is command is used for changing the permissions, and I'm not going to details of this command, but let's say if I want to give a write permission to, let's say, both of this, this group also, I'm group users also, I'm in the root group, users in root group, and also other users. If I want to give write permission, I can use chmod. And for like, if I know the, what this is, right? Read write is there, right? So that is basically read is 3, sorry, read is 4, 4 plus 2 is 6, so the permission is 6. This will be basically again 666 I will do. Okay. And test file. Now if I do again ls minus l, okay, now you see other, like this group has also got write permission. Now others has also got the write permission. Like this is one way of changing the permission. And I'm not going to details of what I did here, like chmod command. It's a bit complex command, and I will provide you some references to read about it. But do remember that chmod command can be used for changing the permissions. Now let's get back to here, and these are same things I have written here. All these commands I have written here, and I have also provided some references, like if you want to read about these commands, how they do, what they do actually, and what other operations you can do with these commands. Do read this too. Let's discuss about mounting a file system. So mounting is the act of associating a storage device to a particular location in the directory tree. Okay. So of course, let's say you have the hardware device, right? You have this hardware device. Now you have to, mount this at some, path basically, let's say, right? Maybe let's say if you want to mount this to root path, right? So you have to use, of course, there is command called mount in Linux. You can, so why do we need to mount this file system, right? The reason is that, we do not know, right? We cannot directly know, let's say if I want to store some file on this disk, right? So how do reference that, right? How do I reference that? Of course, I need some path, right? And for this path, I need to first mount this on some path, right? So let's say now, if I have mounted this on, let's say, root, and let's say maybe OPT, let's say, okay, I have mounted this new, hard disk that I have on this path, let's say, okay. I want to create some new file here, let's say, right, and write to it, for example. Again, I can use the echo command, for example, right? Hello world, let's say, same thing, right? Hello world. And then I will write to some file here, opt, and let's say tmp.txt. Okay. Now what will happen is, since you see this path, right, opt/tmp.txt, and since I have mounted this hard disk at /opt, this file will be stored in this hard disk. Okay. So of course you can have multiple hard disks also in a system, right? Even one hard disk, you can partition it into multiple, right? Multiple smaller partitions. So one of the command is df-h, which can be used to see all the, all the devices that are mounted here. So you can see here that you have only one disk. And do remember, if you remember correctly, I told you everything in Linux is a file. See, all the disks also are represented as file itself, right? /dev/hda8 /dev/hda1, right? That's what I told when I was telling that everything in Linux is a file. And you see every of this. So basically these are your hardware devices. Of course you have only one disk, hda, but this hda has been divided into multiple partitions, 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? And all of these have a mount point. If you see, hda8 is mounted on root, hda1 is mounted on boot, similarly hda5 is mounted on /opt, and others also. And also, what is the size of this hard disk, right? All of this partition, 496 M, right? What is used, how much is available, how much percentage is used, all these stats are, you can use df minus h command and you will get it. So if you do not mount a file, I mean, if you do not mount a device, right, storage device, then you cannot use it. How will you use it, right? Now, this was all about understanding of files and directories and Linux, I mean, commands for, doing certain operations on files and directories. We have also seen the C code also, right, for opening a file, closing the file, reading and writing to it, for example. And these are mostly very closer to you, right? You are doing most of these operations in your day-to-day work. But let's now go to file system implementation. So of course you are not doing, you are not seeing this in your day-to-day work, but the concepts of file system implementation are very important. So how these file systems are implemented internally. So what happens actually when you do this read operations, write operations, what actually is happening on the background, right? That we are going to see now. So in Linux operating system, okay, virtual file system is used for implementing the file system. So it's the virtual file system, or this is also called as VFS, that makes everything possible, right? The reading, writing, whatever you're doing, all those operations that we are doing. So this virtual file system makes all of those possible. So the VFS is an abstraction layer that enables system calls such as open, read, and write to work regardless of the file system or underlying physical medium. So these three lines are very, very important lines to understand what VFS is. So VFS is a kind of abstraction layer, okay? And you'd have heard this abstraction layer a lot. So if you have done object-oriented programming, you'd have seen the concept of abstraction there, right? So in object-oriented programming, you have something like abstract classes, right? For example, abstract classes you have in there, right? I do not remember a lot about this, but you do have something like you just define some classes, right? You define those classes, you define some functions in those, but you do not provide the implementation of that, right? The abstraction layer works by defining the basic conceptual interfaces and data structures that all file system supports, okay? So basically this VFS is going to define all the interfaces and data structures that all file system supports. But do remember, this is important. This VFS is not going to implement these data structures and interfaces, right? It is not going to implement those. It's just abstraction layer. It defines those data structures and interfaces, but then each file system has to implement this basically, okay? The file systems mold their view of concepts such as, okay, this is how I open files, okay? And this is what a directory is to me, to match the expectations of VFS, okay? So VFS has already provided the data structures and functions. Now all the file systems has to match the expectations of what VFS wants, okay? So let's say VFS wants something like, if let's say create inodes, okay? Let's say just example. VFS has a function called create inode, okay? Now there are multiple different file systems. Let's say you have FAT is there, okay? NTFS is there. Let's say ext4 is there, okay? All of these file systems are there. Now all of these file systems has to implement this method, okay? Now VFS will not implement this. It is just an abstraction layer. Now these file systems have to implement this method, create inode. So this VFS is not concerned with how these file systems are implementing this method. It is only concerned with, okay, they should be returning kind of same thing basically, what is it is expecting, right? Of course, it is expecting some result after this function is implemented, right? That's what it needs, nothing else. It does not care about how you implement this. So different file systems, of course, all the file systems are different, right? So they will typically implement this in a different way. But the VFS is only concerned with the answer of that, how they are implementing that. So what happens through the use of VFS? Okay, it is not seeing all this, whatever code they are doing, right? Whatever code they are running on the background to implement this. So basically it is getting hidden from that. And that's what is the importance of having an abstraction layer. To the VFS layer and the rest of the kernel, however, each file system looks the same. Of course, these are not the same file system. They are very different. FAT is very different. NTFS, ext4 are very different. But to the kernel and to this VFS, every of this file system looks same. The reason is again same because it is only concerned with that. Okay, each of these file systems should implement this function and give it an answer. That's what it is concerned with. And if all these file systems are supporting this function, then they look the same to VFS basically. So they all support the notions such as files and directories, and they all support operations such as creating and deleting files, right? So all these files, see, all the file system do the same thing. They create files, they delete files, they help in reading the files, they help in writing the files. Now, how they do is different, right? That can be different. They may be reading, I mean, they may be using some different code for reading the file. Like let's say FAT can use some different, I mean, code for reading a file. And NTFS can use some different code. ext4 can use different code. But finally, they are going to do the same thing. Now, take this example to understand more about VFS here. So let's say if you want to, so this CP, as I told, is a command in Linux used for copying files, right? So if you want to like, for like this, the format was CP, file name 1, file name 2, right? So what this will do, this will copy the contents of file 1. This command will do is it copy the contents of F1 into the new file F2. Okay. So here basically, let's say you have one file on this hard disk that is using ext3 file system. Okay. This hard disk is using ext3 file system. Then you have another removable disk that is using ext file system. Of course, both these file systems are different. And let's say if you want to copy file from, let's say if you want, let's say here is, let's say there is one file temp here, let's say. Okay. Okay. Now let's say if you want to copy this file, okay, to this removal disk, right? So of course these are different. I mean, on both of these devices, the file system itself is different. Okay. Now, if because of VFS, what happens? It makes possible to copy file from one device to another device. If VFS was not there, this would not have been possible because both the file system. So this ext file system is also going to implement read, write, right? Similarly, this real disk is also going to implement read, write. Now, how they implement it can be different. The VFS does not care about how they are implementing it. It just cares that both are implementing these functions, right? And of course, in VFS also read and write are there. Okay. These are some functions of VFS, and all the file system has to implement this. Now, once both the file system has concept of read and write, it's very easy to copy files, right? Now, let's say, let's take the other case, okay? Let's take the case that VFS is not here, okay? VFS is not there. Now, what will happen? Let's say maybe this hard disk was maybe have some other function called, let's say, read uh, disk, let's say, okay, for reading, or and write disk for writing, okay? Similarly, this removable disk has something like R disk read for reading, let's say, okay, and R disk write for writing, okay. Now you see both are implementing, like both have different names, right, for reading and writing, and it will be very different. It will become very difficult for the operating system to remember. I mean, different names for different devices, right? And for different, sorry, for it will be very difficult for the operating system to remember these different functions for different file systems because they can have multiple file systems. Now, because of VFS, what happens? It makes it easier for the operating system to implement like read operation, write operation, because VFS has already defined, okay, that read is there, write is there, and now all of this file system has to implement this same read and write in any way, whatever way they want, okay. That's how, I mean, copying between different file systems is possible in Linux because of VFS. I mean, this is the abstraction layer that makes it possible. For example, so what happens actually? So let's say, if you remember, right, scanf, printf, we have used in that, if you remember, in the C program, we have used this fprintf to write to a file. So what happens is this fprintf actually calls, so this is also in user space. So this fprintf will call write. Okay, write is also called in user space. So this write is basically the system call. Now once this write is called, which is system call, now the flow will change. Now you will enter the kernel space basically from now onwards. So once the system call is called, you enter the kernel space. Now in the kernel space, you will have the VFS. Okay. Now this VFS will have the implementation for this write called sys_write. Okay. Now this sys_write should be implemented by all the file systems that are supported on this operating system. So then it will ask basically a file system to, with this call sys.write to this file system. Now, of course, the file system will have its own write method. It does not matter. It will just, file system will see that the VFS has asked for sys underscore write. Okay. Now, file system can, of course, can have its own method. Let's say uh, write maybe some file. Maybe let's say this is the method of the file system itself, right? Some code here. Now, file system will run this code. Okay, whatever code is here, and finally, whatever you are writing, this will be written to this physical media, right? That's how the operations happens, right? The reading and writing operations. So even if you have a read operation here, then in that case, it would have been fscanf in C programming, right? You will fscanf. This is again in user space. Now this will call, instead of write, it will call read here. Okay. Here it may be a sys underscore read in the VFS. Okay. Now this will call the file system, right, to read, and file system will have its own implementation of this reading. Okay. It will execute that code, and finally, you will read from the physical media. Now there are 4 important data structures in VFS which makes all this possible, right? So as I told, right, one of the important use of VFS is that like there can be multiple file systems using multiple. So there can, so one of the important use of VFS is that you can have multiple file systems, right? You can have multiple file systems on your operating systems, and these multiple file systems can be there on multiple devices, right? So one file system can be there on a floppy disk, right? Floppy disk. One file system can be there on the, let's say, hard disk. Okay. One can be on the SSD itself, right? And this VFS makes it possible to communicate between all of these different file systems and different types of devices, right? And that's the magic of VFS actually. Now, how does this magic actually happens? So this magic happens with the help of 4 important data structures or 4 different objects. Okay. If objects are basically, the concept of object oriented programming, right? And that's what is happening here, right? VFS is also, of course, the code of VFS is written in C programming language in Linux, and C does not have concept of object oriented, right? But still, it tries to go into that way basically, right? It defines these objects. Basically, of course, in C, you use structure, right? Struct for defining this, right? You don't have concept of creating classes in C. So you have superblock, inode, dentry, and file. We will discuss in details about this, but these are the 4 important data structures in VFS. So superblock stores the metadata about a specific mounted file system. Okay. Inode stores metadata about a specific file. Dentry stores a metadata about a directory entry. And file stores metadata about open file as associated with the process. Of course, for now, I have just read this definition, but later on, I am going to go into details of all these 4 important data structures. So let's first look at superblock. So superblock stores information describing a specific file system. Okay. So if you remember, right, we have a concept of mounting the file system. Okay. So let's say, if you have, let's say something like DV, right, and SDA1, right? Let's say this is mounted at the root, let's say, okay, this is the point. And let's say, of course, first you also have to format this disk using some file system, right? Let's say you are using, for example, ext4 file system, right? You have formatted this disk using ext4 file system. So basically this disk is using this file system ext4. Okay. Now, a lot of information has to be stored regarding this, right? Regarding this, where this disk is actually mounted, for example, right? And you can also remove this mount, right? You can later on, let's say, you can also remove this mount and you can change it to dev SDA one, maybe some other, let's say this thing. Okay, you can of course do this. You can change the mount points also in the future. So these all information are stored in superblock, and this is stored in a spatial sector on a disk. So of course this dev underscore, sorry, slash dev slash HDA1 is there, right? This is a disk. Okay. And this information, the superblock, is a data structure, right? This data structure will be stored in a particular spatial place in this disk somewhere. And of course, multiple copies of superblock are stored. Of course, you have different sectors here, right? A lot of sectors are here. So multiple copies are stored of this. The reason is that this superblock is very, very important for the operating system, for the file system itself. So you need to, like, if one of the, let's say it is stored here, right? And this becomes corrupted, right? So you can use other copies of this. This is also used in creating and deleting inodes. So I will discuss about inodes later on, but this is used, Superblock is used for creating this and deleting these inodes. So what does this Superblock stores? So of course I told, right, it stores the metadata about the mounted file system. So these are some of the metadata it stores. It stores the mount point where the file system is mounted. It stores how many inodes are there in that file system, how many blocks are there in that file system. As I told you, right, for the file system, it will see, I mean, for the disk, it is sectors, right? It is sectors. But for the file system, it will see all of them as blocks, okay, basically, right? So it will basically store how many blocks are there, basically, how many of them are free, how many of them are occupied, right? All of those information will be stored in super blocks. So how many inodes are free, how many blocks are free. So basically, whenever blocks are free, it will write to those free blocks, basically, right? It will basically ask the disk to write to those free blocks. And then, of course, for those free blocks, there will be a mapping to free sectors here in the disk. And then the disk will write to it. Then what is the block size here? When was the file system actually created? What was the last mount time? I told you, right? The mount points can keep on changing, right? So what was the last mount time? What is the size of the inode? Of course, I am telling a lot about inode, but I will discuss inode next, so you will understand what inode is. Now let's discuss about one of the most important data structures in Linux file system or on a VFS, that is inodes. You will hear this inode terms a lot. So this stores information about a specific file or directory. Now you see, in Linux, files and directories are treated as same, okay? Both are treated as files itself. And this inode stores information about these files and directories, okay? Inodes are also stored on disk, okay? These are also stored on like some sectors on disk. Now, operations like whenever you do those operations, remember, like mkdir, rmdir, renaming, permission changing, linking, right? All of those are performed on inodes. Do remember that, okay? Now, what an inode stores? So, of course, it stores information about a file. So, what information are there in file? So, of course, inode number is there because you need to uniquely identify. There can be a lot of inodes. So, inode numbers are there to identify each inode uniquely. But then a file can have the user ID of the owner, right? Who is the owner of this file? Who is the, I mean, group owner of this file, right? That is group ID of the owner. Then what are the permissions for this file? What is the file size? What is the last access modified change time for the file, right? This all will be stored in inode. How many blocks the file is using, right? What is the data stored in the file? So that all will be stored in inodes. So of course, data will not be directly stored. So again, data will be typically stored in some blocks, right? Some blocks data will be stored. Let's these 3 blocks. So this inode will have pointers to this. Okay, inode will store the pointers to this basically. Okay, that the data is stored in these 3 blocks. So it will store the pointers to this basically. Next one is Dentry. Dentry is also very, very important. VFS treats directories as a type of file, as I've told you. In the path, let's say /bin/vi, both bin and vi are files. Of course, bin is a directory, right? And vi is, let's say, a file, okay? So basically here, bin is the directory and vi is the file. But for VFS, it will treat both of them as files itself. It will not treat bin as special directory or something. It will treat that also as files. Bin being the special directory file, of course, and vi being a regular file. Of course, bin is also a file, but it's a special directory file, and vi is just a regular file. So let's say if you have a path like home, okay, Shivam, okay, and some temp.txt here, okay. Or you need to resolve it, right? So basically the main aim of, see, all of the data, right, about this. So I want to access this file, okay? I want to access what is stored in this file, right? temp.txt. Now, of course, I know that all the information about this temp.txt is stored in a inode, okay? Because inode stores all the information about this file, like who is the owner of the file, everything, right? As I told here, right? User ID, group owner, permissions, file size, and also data, right? It also stores, inode also stores. So inode for this file, right? temp.txt. It will also store where the data is stored. You will have pointers to where the data about this temp.txt is stored. Then we can read it, right? So first we need to find what is the inode number associated with this file. We need to find first. So for that, you have to resolve this path first, right? So we will discuss about that later on, how this is done. We'll discuss in some time, but this is done with the help of Dentry. Also, Dentry is stored in the main memory and created when files are accessed. Okay, so Dentry is not stored on the disk. It is stored in the main memory and created only when the files are getting accessed. Now, what a Dentry stores, it of course stores the associated inode. Okay, it also stores associated file name, of course, with this inode. Dentry of the parent. So basically, I mean, for this, I mean, of course, you are at some path, right? So see, this Dentry object is created for all of this. So you have slash bin slash vi, for example, right? So here it can be broken down into 4 components: slash bin slash is again, I mean, same as this, and vi. Okay. Now, of course, the unique ones are slash bin and vi. Okay. Now, for each of this, there will be a Dentry object created when you are accessing this files. Okay. Now, for each of this, for example, slash, right? It will store, okay, what is the inode associated with this slash? Okay. Because as I told, right, the slash is the kind of path itself, right? What is inode with this? Then what is the associated file name with this? Okay. So of course that is slash here itself, right? This is the name. Dentry of the parent. So of course slash does not have a parent. So there will be no pointer here. Okay. Now list of subdirectories. So there are a lot of subdirectories inside that, right? Like you have bin is there, home is there, right? It will store this also here. Now similarly for bin again, it will store what is the inode number, right? So of course bin is a directory, right? And directory will also have an inode associated with it. So which is the inode associated with this? What is the file name of this? Okay. I mean, of course, bin here. Then the entry of the parent here, right? For example, here, if you see parent is this one, right? So it will also store this Dentry of the parent also here. Similarly for VI also. So these all information are stored in Dentry. Okay. And we will see how this is very useful in resolving a path. Now, how path resolution happens using Dentry? This is very, very important. So let's say if you have something like this path, you have resolved this path, right? Slash foo slash bar dot txt. Okay. Now what will happen? First, you have to get inode associated with, I mean, this one. So basically this path is first, this slash is there, right? So you have to get what is the inode associated with slash. So this is typically hard coded and stored in the operating system. So there will be some hard coded inode number for this. Okay. So let's say you have got this, right? Now you have to, so once you have got this, now you have to search foo. After this, you have the foo directory, right? So you have to search the inode for foo directory, right? So you will search for foo inside this, I mean, slash, right? So this, I mean, if you get the inode for this, and then you will have the pointers to the data, right? What is stored in this. So of course, in slash, you have a lot of directories are stored, right? So they will be stored something like maybe something like maybe 01. I'm just giving an example here, bin, comma 02, maybe lib. Okay. And other directories also are stored here. Okay. So basically it will also search for foo inside this. So somewhere there will be maybe foo is also there somewhere, right? Now it will get the, using this entry, it will get the inode number of foo here. Okay. Now it knows, okay, what is the inode number for foo? Now it knows this. Okay. Now once you have got the inode of foo, but now in the foo, now you need to search bar. Okay. So again, let's go to inode of, now you are in inode of foo. Okay. And of course, this inode will also store the data. Okay. And pointers to the data. Now again, in this inode, this is of foo, you will have a lot of directories here. Okay. Like, of course, let's say something maybe test is there. Okay. And 09 bar is here. Okay. Okay. Now basically we are searching for bar. Okay. Where is, what is the inode number for bar? And we see that, okay, 09 is the, I mean, we have found bar inside this foo directory, right? And we see that 09 is the inode. So we have also got the inode number, let's say for bar here. Okay. Now we know that, okay, now we are in the inode of basically bar find. We are here. So small bar. So now we have the inode of bar. Okay. Now, of course, it will also contain all the data about this bar directory, right? What are the permissions and everything, inode number, everything. It will also contain pointer to the where the data is stored, right? In bar also there will be, I mean, a lot of files and a lot of directories, right? So again, there will be something, I mean, again, in brackets, there will be there, right? Let's see. I'm just taking this example. I'm not in this the actual way it is stored, just taking an example. So there will be something like maybe, let's say 11 for something like text.txt, okay? That's the 12 for bar.txt, okay? Now it will see that, okay, uh, now it will see that 12 is the inode number associated with this bar.txt, right? So we know that, okay, now finally, we have got what is the inode of bar.txt, okay? So we have basically, we have gone into this /foo/bar folder now, right? And we have got the inode of bar.txt. So once we get the inode of this, right? Again, there will be again inode of, finally we go to inode of bar.txt, okay? And of course, this will again have a lot of information here, but finally it will have a pointers to the blocks where the data is actually stored, okay? Maybe 2 or 3 blocks, whatever blocks it is taking. And finally, the operating system should be able to read these blocks, right? Whatever data is stored in this. And on whatever device it is stored, it will ask that device, I mean, help of that device, it will be able to read these blocks, okay? And that's how everything path resolution happens, okay? And this is very important, right? Resolving a path is very expensive operation as it involves a lot of disk IO and string operations. So we are doing a lot of string operations, right? We will be comparing, right? For example, when we are searching for foo in slash, right? We will do a string operation. Is this equal to foo? No. Is this equal to foo? No. This is equal to foo? Yes. So these are string operations, right? You're comparing strings, and these are very expensive actually. And also you are doing a lot of IO operations, right? Because these inodes are typically first stored on the disk. So you have to go to disk, locate this, read this, right? So a lot of IO operations are there. So these operations are very expensive. That's why the kernel caches the entry objects to make the path resolution faster, right? So let's say, for example, here, finally you would have got inode number associated with this path, right? Slash foo/bar/bar.txt, right? So of course, you have got inode for a lot of path here. So some of the, for example, you have got inode number for this. What is the inode for this? Okay. You have got what is the inode for this? You have got the inode for this. You have got inode for this, right? I mean, this mapping basically, right? /foo is this inode, this is this inode, right? Now, the kernel does not want to waste this effort that it has done, right? It has wasted a lot of time in finding the inode for this, right? And what happens? Let's say, I mean, some other user again opens this same file, let's say for reading, right? So does the kernel needs to again do this all operations? No, because it will. So does the kernel again needs to do all these operations again? I mean, it can do, but it is very expensive. It will take a lot of time. So kernel will cache all of this mapping. And that's what your Dentry is. Dentry is basically, if you see what a Dentry stores, right? It stores the associated file name and the inode. These two are very important. It stores the associated, inode with particular file. And these three entries will be stored in the Dentry, right? As different. So this will be one Dentry, D1, this will be another entry D2, another entry D3, okay? And this will be stored in the main memory itself. This will be cached basically, okay? And one of the important thing you would have seen, I'm not sure if you had noticed that inode does not store the file name, okay? What is, so inode stores a lot of information about the file and directories, right? But it will never store the file name in this, okay? That is stored in the Dentry itself. In the Dentry stores the associated file name and then the inode. So the reason is that because of this, links are made possible in Linux, like soft links and hard links. I'm not going to cover it here, but that's the reason that the in inode file name is not stored. Those are stored in the Dentry itself. And I mean, maybe in some other video, I can discuss more about what links are, soft and hard links. And maybe you can also go online and read about this. And this is made possible because of this Dentry. Now the last and the important data structure in VFS is file. Okay. Now file is basically very closer to you because you mostly operate on files. Now the file object is used to represent a file opened by a process. So if you remember, right, in the C program that we have seen, we have used fopen, right? So whenever we are using fopen, it is actually creating a new file object. And of course, this file object will have a unique file descriptor that we have already talked, right? So if you, if you create fopen with some file, let's say, F1, right? Name F1. So it will have another unique file object created for it, let's say, okay, capital F1. Now, if you do for F2, right, file F2, it will have another unique file object created for this. Of course, these two will be differentiated by unique numbers will be there for that. Those are called file descriptors. A process deal directly with files, not superblocks, inodes, or dentries. This is very, very important, right? Your process, right? But in the, let's say you are running this C program. Now it becomes a process when you run it, right? Now it only deals with this file object. Whatever operations it will do on this file object itself. It does not know about superblocks, inodes, or dentries. It will not see that. The file object is in-memory representation of a file. The file object is the in-memory representation of an open file. The object, but not the physical file, is created in response to the open system call. Do remember. So basically, fopen will then call the open system call. And do remember, in this open system call, not the actual, the file is created, not the physical file is created. It is only, in memory, right? You are actually representing a file. So that is getting created. That object is getting created. And it is destroyed in response to the close. So basically when you do open, this F1 file object is created. When you do close on this file F1, then this will be destroyed from the memory. Operations like read, write, open, close, etc. are performed on this file object itself, basically. So basically whatever you are doing, right, read, write, everything you are doing on this file object. This is the closest to the user also. And you typically will never see super blocks, inodes, or dentries, whenever you are dealing with process, right, writing code or anything. So what a file stores, what does this file object stores? So it will store dentry associated with the path. Okay, it will store the file mode, whether it is read or write. So whenever you do fopen, right, fopen, you also tell, right, whether you are going to read or write or read, let's say. Okay, so you are also providing that. So this file object also stores this. It also stores file offset, right? So if you are reading a file, so let's say this is the file. So initially, maybe you will start with 0. If you start reading from 0, starting from 0, then you may reach 50, right? So this, now once you have reached 50, the offset becomes 50, right? Now it can again change, for example, right? It keeps track of where actually you are there in the file, right? With the help of file offset. It also stores pointers to the file operations table. So there will be table, right, for operations like read, write, and all of this. So there is a pointer. This, let's say F1 is there, right? Object, file object. This will store a pointer to this. And then you can call this read, write, and all of this basically. I will again at last go into details. And also at last, what I will do, I will connect this four basically. Basically, when you are actually reading or writing a file, what actually is happening, I will connect this four with that basically, like file object, entry, inode, and superblock with that. This is the kind of, I will say, diagram for this. How the file system, right, is interacting with others also. Of course, one thing is left here. Let me draw that also. At the bottom, you will have this devices basically, right? That is not drawn here, but you will have devices like maybe hard disk is there. Maybe you have keyboard also here. Maybe floppy disk, let's say if you have floppy disk. So you will have at the bottom, you will have also devices that is not shown here. Of course, in the user space, you have user applications and C libraries or whatever libraries are there. And you are writing the code here. So whatever code, the C program that I've written, that is executed in the user space here, right? Using some libraries, for example. And then, for example, when I used, for example, right, fopen, right, in that program. Now, fopen basically, and of course, fopen will run in user space, but then it is going to call open system call. So when open system is called, system call is called, now the trigger will go to the system call interface. which is there in the kernel space basically now. Okay. Now basically system call interface. So for this, I mean, all these file operations, right? Like open, read, write, close. Okay. For this, what will happen? All these calls will then go to virtual file system. Okay. I mean, if the system call is different, okay. Let's say if it is fork system call, okay. Then fork will not go to VFS. VFS is only for file system related system calls. Okay. So for these four system calls, now the control will go to the virtual file system. But for fork, it will be different. It will not be same. This virtual file system also has this directory cache, that is directory cache that I discussed, right? You also cache all the mappings of files and inodes. Inode cache is also there. So inodes are typically stored on the disk, but again, accessing disk every time when you need data about files is not good, right? So the kernel also caches all these inodes in the main memory. Then after VFS, so once the open, so if you remember one of the diagram, right? Sys write, that diagram, okay? Now, once you do sys write here, right? Then it will go to the individual file system, right? The individual file system has to implement this write. It can implement it anyway, whatever it wants to, right? Then there is also concept of buffer cache. And buffer cache is again to, so if you want to cache this data, right? Some data will be written in the disk. Some data will be getting read from the disk, right? So that can be cached in this buffer cache. I'm not going to discuss more about buffer cache here, but you can read more about this. Then device drivers are also used, which are again closest to these devices. For every device, there will be a separate device driver. And I mean, basically device drivers are used to communicate between, I mean, these devices, right? Actual devices itself. And then they will be used with the help of device drivers. You will be able to read or write or do anything basically. So this is a basically flow, right? So virtual file system will call the individual file system. Okay. The individual file system of the buffer cache is used for performance. Then the individual file system will call the device drivers of those file system, I mean, of those devices. And then device driver will basically talk to these devices. And that is the kind of architecture of the Linux file system, basically, how everything connects to each other. So now what we'll do is we will try to connect like how Dentry, inode, superblock, right? And a file object, all of them helps in actually reading or writing a file. So this is a diagram here that I have drawn here to make you understand it easily. So if you remember the code of that C code, right, where we were opening the file, like two files, one was names.txt, okay, another was greet.txt, okay. So we were reading content from this file and then writing to greet.txt. That's what we were doing the C program. So let's see how using VFS that is done, right? How with the help of VFS that is done. I mean, all the VFS objects basically, okay. So of course, when you run that program, that C program was there, right? When you run that program, it will become a process and it will get a process ID. Let's say the process ID is 10234. And this, I mean, if you remember from the on my discussion on process, right? When I was discussing about process, I told for each process, a process control block is created, right? And in this process control block, a lot of information about process is stored. So one of the information is also called known as process table. So basically this process, or you can call this process file table basically, right? So this stores, like these are basically the file descriptors, FD. As I told, right, for each unique file, a unique file descriptor will be there. So you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it can go on, right? More files you read, sorry, more files you open in this process, this list will continue go on. Similarly, each process has this process file table. Okay, these are the file descriptors here. So 0, 1, 2 are typically reserved. So these are reserved for 0 is for standard input, 1 is for standard output, 2 is for standard error. So these are reserved. 0, 1, and 2 are reserved for this input, output, and standard input, standard output, and standard errors. But from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you can like open any file in the, I mean, C program, right? So when you open the first file, that was names.txt, it will typically be given this, the first file descriptor that is not taken. That is 3 here because 0, 1 and 2 is already taken. So 3 is the one that is free. So 3 will be provided for the names.txt file descriptor, and 3 will be provided for it. For greet.txt, the next one, that is 4, will be provided. Now as I told, right, which object is closest to the user or to this program? It's the file object. So this is your, now you have the file object here. Of course, this is Dentry, I have not named it. Then you have inode. So the closest object to this process actually is the file. So a file object will be created for both of these. So of course, both are different, right? You are using app open on both of them. You are using app open on names.txt. Then you are using app open on greet.txt. And for each open call, a different file object is created. So for the first one, this file object is created. And if you remember, right, we have opened using, we have passed R here and W here. So basically, first file we are opening in read mode, and second file we are opening in write mode. That's why you see mode is read here for the third means the first file names of txt, and offset is 0 because we are going to start reading from start. And then in this file object, there will be a pointer to Dentry basically, right? Which is a Dentry for this, I mean, associated with this file names.txt. And this Dentry, the important, important parameter, and its Dentry, the important metadata are the path of the file and what is the inode for this, this file basically, right? So this Dentry will store the path and also the inode. And let's assume that the full path for this names of txt was /home/name.txt, okay? And of course, what is the inode associated with this file names.txt, that, this inode will be pointing to that. Similar thing will happen for this, the file descriptor 4, which was opened for, of course, sorry, this will be write here, not read, because second one was grid.txt, right? That was used for writing purpose. So that mode will be write, offset will be 0. It will again point to a Dentry object. Dentry here path will be /home/grid.txt for second file. And again, it will point to the inode. Finally, you will have the inode basically, where actually the information about this file names of txt or grid.txt will be stored. So see the inode for first file names.txt. There will be some inode number. What is the file size? Let's say it's 20 bytes. What is the user ID of the owner? Let's say 5 is the user ID of the owner. Then the actual data in this file. Of course, I have not drawn it. I didn't have a space here. But then you will have the, let's say you will have the, disk here, right? A lot of blocks will be here on the disk. And this data will be pointing typically to this. There can be multiple pointers also. It's not a single one. Maybe there can be, let's say, in these 2 blocks, let's say this names.txt data is stored. So this data will point to this. Similarly, you have inode here of the second file, grid.txt. Inode number is there. Files are initially 0. Since let's say you have just opened it, but you have not written anything. User ID is again, let's say 5, data again. So once you start writing, right? Once you start writing, then kernel basically will allot some blocks for this. Let's say maybe this, and when you have finally written this, and let's say this one, okay? This will point to the data blocks. These are the basically data blocks on the disk. Okay. So this is the overall structure of what happens, right? When you open a file for reading or writing. So similar thing will happen when you do this in the shell itself, right? In the shell also we ran cat command, okay? We ran echo command, right? For writing and cat for reading, right? Similar things will happen in that case. But in that case, typically what will happen, you can use a standard input and a standard output, right? So in that case, that will be used for shell. But if you are writing, so even in the case of cat command, echo command, similar thing is going to happen. So you can read a file even from shell, right? You can read a file even from your code itself. You can use even Python programming language for reading, writing file, Java, right? In every each of these same things are going to happen on the background in Linux operating system. So I hope that now you would have understood how this, 4 important data structures like file, Dentry. Discussed much about superblocks here. The reason is superblocks are mostly used for storing information about the file system itself, right? How many inodes are free, how many blocks are free, what is the mount point and all of this, right? So that's why I have not connected much with Superblocks here, but that is also important basically. I hope right now you will be able to explain if somebody asks you, right, what happens actually when you open a file or close a file or read a file, write a file, right? You now understand what's happening on the background with the help of VFS objects, what's happening on the background, right? So you can connect this. So this is very low level. And this is again, this is more kind of not very low, but this is more of a higher level architecture, right? How everything is happening. So now this VFS I have broken down here, for example, right, into different components. That is not there. This is kind of high level architecture diagram of what actually happens when you read or write to a file, right? This is a very low level of how actually VFS helps in reading or writing to a file. And this Dentry would have been created, right? I have not discussed here how it, so kernel would have created this Dentry object. As I told you, right? These are not stored on disk. These are created and stored in the main memory itself. So while resolving the path, the kernel would have created this Dentry object. And of course, this file object is also stored in memory itself. So when you actually open a file, this file object is getting created. Now, when the kernel is resolving the file, then it will create the Dentry object. Of course, inode object is already there on the disk, right? If it, let's say, of course, for inode also, there is, you see here, there is inode cache is there, right? So if this inode is already there in the main memory, then of course kernel does not need to go to the disk, right? But if this inode of this file names.txt is not there on the in the main memory, then the kernel has to first go to disk, fetch the inode, and then load it into the main memory. And of course, the data blocks are, on the in the disk or maybe cached. In sometimes these may be cached in the buffer cache itself, right? So if it is already there in the buffer cache, then it is fine. It will be very faster to read this data, right? You can very fast read this data. But if this inode is sorry, if this data blocks are there on the disk itself, then the kernel has to read this data. It will take more time. So that's all about, how file system is implemented in Linux operating system and what are files and directories and why the need for file system, right? And I hope you have understood a lot about file systems from this video. And if you do have any doubts, do comment in the comment section, because I know this is a very bit, complex to understand. You may not understand all of this concept, like the first time you go through this, but then if you go through this multiple times, and also maybe if you do not understand something, to Google search also, you will find a lot of resources, and you should be able to finally at least understand the how it works actually. You do not need to go into very deep of everything, but you should have a basic understanding of how file system is implemented in Linux. So that's all for this video. Thank you.